For 15 years, I was the family joke and the husband who cooked, cleaned, and never complained. But when my wife and in-laws laughed at me one too many times, I finally snapped. I walked out, found my own space, and reclaimed my self-respect. Some families are loving and supportive while others thrive on friendly banter. My family? Well, I was the punchline. For 15 years, I played the role of the quiet husband, the diligent cook, the guy who never complained, just smiled and kept being useful. Until one night, everything changed. It all started on my brother-in-law Nicholas's 45th birthday. Now, Nicholas has always been the life of the party, the loud, confident, successful one. Meanwhile, I'm the guy who loves cooking, who spends 3 days planning a meal that'll blow everyone's mind. For this party, I pulled out all the stops: handmade pasta, slow-roasted prime rib, the kind that melts in your mouth, and a chocolate lava cake that would make professional chefs weep. There we were, 14 of us, sitting around the table, everyone laughing and eating like it was their last meal. I brought out the final dish, the piece de resistance, when Nicholas slapped me on the back so hard, I nearly dropped it. Sauce splashed over the side, and that's when he said it, grinning like he just delivered the punchline of the year. Every family needs a punchline. Thanks for making the rest of us look like winners. The laughter that followed was loud, uncontrollable, the kind that echoes in your skull long after it stops. My daughter Josephine nearly choked on her drink, wheezing out, "Dad's like a wet paper towel." I could feel my face freezing in a tight smile, trying not to let it show how much it stung. Then my wife Stephanie leaned back, that little smirk playing on her lips, and said, "Honestly, he's more like a Roomba, quiet, programmable, and only useful when there's a mess." That was it. The whole table lost it. My mother-in-law Frances wiped tears from her eyes, and my nephew pounded the table in hysterics. I just stood there, holding the dish like an idiot, my ears burning. Here's the thing, I've always been the quiet one. Never confrontational, always taking things in stride. And honestly, I'd been the family punchline for so long, I didn't even register it as cruel anymore. Just normal. Banter. Family stuff. But that night, something changed. Maybe it was seeing my daughter join in. Maybe it was the way Stephanie looked at me, not even checking if I was okay with being the butt of the joke. Or maybe after 15 years, I just couldn't take it anymore. After dinner, they all moved to the living room to keep the party going. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up, my hands shaking as I loaded the dishwasher. I kept replaying the moment in my head, hearing their laughter, seeing their faces. For the first time, it didn't feel like good-natured teasing. It felt like humiliation, pure and simple. That night, I lay in bed next to my snoring wife, scrolling through my phone's photo gallery. Pictures of birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, all where I'd cooked elaborate meals, made everyone feel special, and always smiled like a damn fool. It hit me then. I'd spent 15 years trying to be useful, trying to make them happy, and in return, I'd become their joke. At 3 a.m. I made a decision. I was done being the punchline. I was done being the guy everyone walked over. It was time to take my life back. Sunday morning came, and I was up early as usual. Coffee was brewed, the kitchen was spotless, and Stephanie stumbled in, still half asleep, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had changed. I told her I was going to the store, and she barely looked up, just grunted some acknowledgement. But I didn't go to the store. I went to the bank. Withdrew exactly half of our savings and checking accounts, nothing more, nothing less. I wasn't trying to screw anyone over, I just needed to make a statement. Then I drove across town to my sister Heidi's place. Heidi's one of the few people who ever called out Stephanie and her family for how they treated me. She once shut down Nicholas at Christmas when he called me domesticated. When I told her everything, Heidi didn't look surprised, just sad. She offered me her guest room, but I wanted a place of my own. By afternoon, I'd signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment. Nothing special, but it had a decent kitchen. I was starting over. I left a note on the kitchen counter back home, "Find someone else to be your punchline." Then I turned off notifications on my phone. By evening, I had 47 missed calls and texts. 23 from Stephanie, 15 from Josephine, and the rest from the in-laws. I responded to just one, Josephine's. "I love you, but I need some space. We'll talk soon." The next morning, I called my friend Austin, who'd been through a rough divorce. We met for breakfast, and he gave me a crash course in separation 101. Document everything, don't waste joint money, and don't badmouth your ex to the kids. I spent Monday setting up new bank accounts, changing my auto payments, and canceling joint subscriptions. Sorry, Netflix. If Stephanie wanted to keep watching her true crime docs, she'd have to pay for it herself. By Tuesday, my phone started buzzing again. This time it was Frances, my mother-in-law. The first 6 calls went to voicemail. I finally listened to one. "James, please, this is ridiculous. Whatever happened, we can fix it. Stephanie is beside herself, and Josephine doesn't understand why her father abandoned them. Please call back." Abandon them? Are you kidding me? 15 years of cooking, cleaning, and being the family's punching bag, and I'm the one who abandoned them? I spent the evening compiling evidence, screenshots of texts where Stephanie belittled me, photos from events where I did all the work and was ignored, notes from therapy sessions I'd attended alone. By Wednesday morning, I emailed it all to Frances, Nicholas, and a few other key family members. Subject line, "Why I left, a 15-year overview." No one called for hours after that went out. Then the floodgates opened. Nicholas texted, "Dude, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." Frances, more thoughtful, said, "I had no idea you felt this way. We need to talk in person." Stephanie predictably raged, "How dare you air our private business to my family? This is so embarrassing. Notice what's missing there? An actual apology." By Thursday, it became clear that I wasn't coming back anytime soon. Stephanie's tone changed from outrage to desperation. Suddenly it was, "I miss you so much. I never realized how much you do around here. Josephine and I had cereal for dinner last night because neither of us knows how to cook anything decent." Yeah, welcome to reality. It's amazing how fast they noticed my absence when the house stopped running itself. I'll admit it, part of me felt guilty. But a bigger part felt something else, something new and unfamiliar, self-respect. By Friday, the guilt was getting to me. I kept reminding myself why I left, how they laughed at me and treated me like I was nothing but a walking kitchen appliance. But still, the idea that Josephine thought I just walked out on her hurt more than I expected. Then my friend Austin called to check in. He said something that hit home. "James, it's not abandonment to refuse to be mistreated." That evening, I got a voicemail from Stephanie. She sounded defeated. "James, I'm trying. I am. Josephine misses you. I miss you. Can we just talk?" I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I didn't know how to respond. I'd spent years keeping the peace, smoothing things over. Now that I'd finally pushed back, I didn't know how to navigate the aftermath. Saturday came and I met Austin again, this time to discuss formal separation terms. Nothing final, just a draft to show I was serious. Austin pulled no punches. He laid out terms that were fair but firm, acknowledging the emotional labor I'd been putting in for years. The reality of it all hit me. This wasn't just a dramatic exit. I was considering a life without Stephanie, without my family. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with another message from Josephine. "Dad, can we just talk? I'm confused. Please." That one broke me. I texted back, "We'll talk soon, I promise." Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but there they were, Stephanie and Francis, both looking like they hadn't slept. Mascara streaks down their faces, practically pleading with their eyes. Part of me wanted to shut the door, let them stew in their guilt. But I'm not that guy. I let them in. Stephanie started talking first, apologizing but not really. It was more of the same. "We didn't realize how much it hurt you, it was just jokes, you've always been the quiet one." I sat there silently, letting her talk herself into a corner. When she was done, I asked one question: "If Nicholas had made the joke about you, would you have laughed?" The silence was deafening. Stephanie looked stunned, like it had never occurred to her to see it from my perspective. Francis tried to step in, talking about family dynamics and how I'd always been a bit too sensitive. That's when I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Yeah, I'd recorded that dinner. Not the whole thing, just the part where Nicholas made me the punchline and everyone laughed like I was the family fool. Hearing it out loud hit me differently. Stephanie's face crumpled and Francis just sat there, her mouth tight. I told them that I'd been collecting moments like that for years. Not intentionally at first, but it became a habit, proof that I wasn't imagining things, that it wasn't just in my head. When it ended, Stephanie looked genuinely remorseful for the first time. She admitted she'd never thought of me as the joke before, just the reliable one, the stable one. Then she dropped a bomb. Nicholas had been at their house every night that week, convincing her I was having a midlife crisis and would eventually come back once I realized where my bread was buttered. And then another bomb. Nicholas was drowning in debt. He'd made some bad investments and was practically bankrupt. He'd been trying to borrow money from Stephanie, and when she hesitated, he turned on me, saying I was ungrateful and throwing a tantrum for no reason. It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, Stephanie wasn't just remorseful, she was angry at Nicholas, at herself, at the whole situation. For the first time in years, I saw her question the dynamic that had kept me in the role of the family joke. Maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see me. After that confrontation, Stephanie and Francis left, but the damage was already done. The truth was out and I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Part of me wanted to believe Stephanie could change. Another part wasn't ready to let go of the anger I'd been carrying for so long. A few days later, Nicholas showed up at my work. Just barged right into the break room like he owned the place, spouting off about how I was tearing the family apart over some harmless jokes. I let him talk himself in circles before casually mentioning his failing investments and how he'd been trying to borrow money from Stephanie. The look on his face was priceless, like I'd just slapped him with reality. "You don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but I could see the panic in his eyes. I didn't press further. I just told him that if he ever tried to manipulate Stephanie again, I'd make sure his wife knew the whole story. The next day, Stephanie texted me saying she'd confronted Nicholas and that he'd confessed to lying about me and his financial troubles. Turns out his wife had kicked him out after finding out he'd been hiding debts for years. Stephanie was still reeling from the realization that her brother, the golden child, wasn't as perfect as she always believed. Josephine finally reached out, asking to meet up for coffee. I agreed, and when we sat down, she looked at me with teary eyes and said, "I didn't know, Dad. I just thought you liked doing all that stuff. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." Hearing her say that almost broke me. I told her it wasn't her fault, it was just the way things had been for so long that no one ever questioned it. We talked for hours about school, about her friends, about how she felt caught between loyalty to her mom and trying to understand why I left. I told her the truth: I love you and I'll always be there for you. But I couldn't keep being treated like that. I had to stand up for myself, even if it hurt. For the first time, I saw genuine understanding in her eyes. She hugged me before leaving, whispering, "I'm sorry, Dad." The next morning, Stephanie called and asked if we could talk. This time, it wasn't frantic or angry, just quiet. We met at a coffee shop and I could tell she hadn't slept much. She started by saying she'd made an appointment with a therapist just for herself. That hit differently. Stephanie admitting she needed help was something I never thought I'd hear. She confessed that she never realized how much her actions hurt me. That seeing me leave was like a wake-up call she never saw coming. "I took you for granted," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought you'd always be there no matter what. I never thought I'd lose you." I didn't have an answer for her. I just told her that I needed time to see real change. Not just words. Real, consistent actions. She nodded, looking almost grateful that I hadn't shut her out completely. That night, I thought about everything, about Nicholas, about how Stephanie was trying to change, about Josephine seeing me differently. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Like my feelings mattered. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to forgive them. Thanksgiving was approaching, and it dawned on me that this would be the first holiday I'd be spending alone. Usually, I'd be the one planning the whole meal, 3 days of cooking, preparing the turkey, the sides, and the desserts. This time, I had no plans at all. I was half considering just ordering takeout when I got a call from Francis. "James, we want to do Thanksgiving at your place. We'll cook. All of us." I almost laughed out loud. The thought of Stephanie, Francis, and Josephine attempting to cook a Thanksgiving dinner was both hilarious and heartwarming. "Are you sure you can handle it?" I asked, only half joking. Francis chuckled, admitting they'd been looking up recipes and practicing mashed potatoes, which had apparently turned out chunky but edible. I agreed, on one condition: it had to be at my apartment. I wasn't ready to go back to the house. Thanksgiving morning came, and they showed up with grocery bags full of ingredients, none of which made any sense for a traditional dinner. Stephanie had a printed recipe for turkey that looked like it had been sourced from some questionable cooking blog. Josephine was in charge of desserts, armed with boxed brownie mix and a pumpkin pie she'd picked up from the grocery store. Watching them try to navigate my small kitchen was like seeing a live-action cooking disaster. Stephanie nearly set off the smoke alarm, Francis was convinced the gravy should taste like cinnamon, and Josephine managed to turn mashed potatoes into something that looked like wallpaper paste. But they tried. They really tried. When we finally sat down to eat, the turkey was dry, the stuffing was sweet, and the green bean casserole was crunchy. But they'd done it. They'd put in the effort for the first time in years. As we sat around the tiny table, Francis raised her glass. "To James, for reminding us that love isn't about what you do for people, but how you make them feel. We're sorry for making you feel small." Stephanie followed, her voice unsteady. "I'm sorry too, for all the times I laughed instead of standing up for you. I didn't realize how much you were hurting." Josephine pulled out her phone and read a note she'd written. "Dad, you're not a Roomba. You're not a joke. You're the guy who's always there, no matter what. I took you for granted and I'm really sorry. I want to do better." I didn't say much. I couldn't. I just nodded and swallowed the lump in my throat. As flawed as the meal was, it was the first time I felt like they were actually seeing me. Later that night, as they were leaving, Stephanie pulled me aside. "I know this doesn't fix everything," she said quietly. "But I'm trying, James. I really am." I looked at her, really looked. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing that smirk or acting like everything was a joke. She looked genuinely vulnerable. "I know," I replied. "But it's going to take time." She nodded, holding back tears, and left with Francis and Josephine. As I cleaned up the chaotic remnants of dinner, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, things could change. December rolled around and the reality of spending Christmas apart started sinking in. My apartment was barely decorated, a sad little tree I picked up from the grocery store, a single string of lights hanging awkwardly on the window. It was weird not being in the house with Stephanie and Josephine, not planning the elaborate dinner that had always been my job. One night, I was heating up some leftovers when my phone buzzed, a text from Stephanie. "Would you consider coming over for Christmas Eve dinner? Just dinner. No expectations. Josephine really wants to see you." I didn't reply right away. Part of me wanted to say yes, but I wasn't sure I could handle stepping back into that house yet. The next morning, Josephine texted me too. "Please, Dad. It won't be the same without you." I finally agreed on the condition that I wouldn't be cooking. Stephanie agreed instantly. "We'll handle it. Just show up." When I arrived that evening, the house looked different, new decorations, fewer fancy lights, more handmade ornaments. Josephine greeted me at the door with a hug that nearly knocked me over. Stephanie was in the kitchen, looking slightly frazzled, but she smiled when she saw me. Dinner wasn't anything spectacular. They'd made lasagna, which was, well, edible. The sauce was watery and the noodles were a bit crunchy, but no one was complaining. The atmosphere felt different too, quieter, more sincere. There wasn't the usual chaos or the teasing that used to pepper every conversation. After dinner, we sat around the living room talking about random things, Josephine's school projects and Stephanie's new hobby of baking with questionable results. At some point, Josephine brought out an old photo album. She flipped through pictures of birthdays and holidays, most of them featuring me in the kitchen, apron-clad, smiling like an idiot. She hesitated before saying, "I didn't realize how much you did, Dad. I just always thought you liked it." Stephanie looked down, wiping her hands on her jeans. "We took you for granted. I took you for granted." I didn't see it until you left. I didn't know what to say. There was a part of me that wanted to tell them it was too late, that I'd moved on. But sitting there, seeing how they were trying, how Stephanie had even decorated the tree with ornaments from our first Christmas together, I felt something thaw. We spent the evening playing board games, something we hadn't done in years. Josephine laughed without the sarcastic edge that had become her norm. Stephanie was quieter than usual but seemed more present. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a family joke. When it was time to leave, Stephanie walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I know it doesn't fix things, but it means a lot." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I could feel the emotions bubbling up: hope, fear, nostalgia. I wanted to believe it could work out, but I wasn't ready to jump back in yet. As I drove back to my apartment, I couldn't help but think about how things were changing. Slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. Maybe this Christmas wasn't perfect, but it was the first time in years that I didn't feel like the punchline. New Year's Eve arrived, and for the first time in over a decade, I wasn't hosting a party. Instead, I found myself alone in my tiny apartment, a frozen pizza in the oven, and a bottle of cheap champagne waiting to be opened. I wasn't sure if I felt relieved or lonely. Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. It was Josephine. "Hey, Dad. Mom wanted to know if you'd like to come over. Just to watch the ball drop. No pressure." I hesitated, glancing around my sparse apartment. I hadn't made any plans and wasn't sure if spending the night with them was a good idea. But before I could decide, Josephine added she made lasagna again. This time, it's good. Something about the way she said it made me smile. Maybe it was the hope in her voice, or maybe I just didn't want to spend the night alone. I agreed to come over. When I got there, the house was quiet, almost peaceful. Stephanie greeted me with a tentative smile, and Josephine practically tackled me with a hug. The table was set and there was the lasagna. This time it looked decent. Dinner was surprisingly good. Josephine proudly announced that she'd helped cook and had been learning new recipes with Stephanie. As we ate, I couldn't help but notice the changes in both of them. Stephanie seemed more grounded and less quick with the sarcastic comments. Josephine was more thoughtful, asking me about work and my new place without the usual teenage indifference. As midnight approached, we gathered around the TV. Stephanie handed me a glass of sparkling cider. "I know it's not champagne, but I thought you might want to keep a clear head tonight." I nodded, appreciating the gesture. When the countdown began, Josephine squeezed my hand. 10, 9, 8. I glanced over at Stephanie. She was watching me, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years: respect. When the clock struck midnight, we toasted with our glasses and laughed when Josephine accidentally knocked hers over, cider spilling onto the rug. No one yelled or made a joke at my expense. Instead, Stephanie grabbed a towel and we all cleaned up together. Before I left, Stephanie pulled me aside. "I know it's going to take time," she said, "but I'm not giving up on us. I'll keep working on myself. I just wanted you to know that." I looked at her, trying to see the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. Maybe she was still there, under the layers of indifference and years of treating me like a joke. "I know," I replied. "I just need to see it. I need to feel it." She nodded, understanding that words weren't enough anymore. As I drove home, I realized that I wasn't sure what the future held. Maybe we would fix things, or maybe we wouldn't. But one thing was clear: I wasn't the same man who took it all silently. I had found my voice, my boundaries, and my self-respect. I guess the biggest lesson I learned was that love without respect is just dependency in disguise. And I was done being the dependable joke. For the first time, I felt like I was walking into a new year on my terms. What do you think? Would you give someone a second chance after years of being the family punchline? Or is it better to move on and build a new life? Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.